was your speech on this?
I'm sorry?
5 to 7?
5 to 7. Two left feet and no rhythm. I see many of you smiling and nodding. You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Men who can't dance. In medical jargon, it may sound something like this. A congenital hemi-malformation linked to the Y chromosome, affecting all of the tarsal and metatarsal bones of the right foot, in association with the complete inability to follow any kind of rhythm or footstep sequence, also known as the Astaire antithesis syndrome. Who needs to talk like this? I certainly won't, not today. I'd like to talk about dancing in simple, everyday terms. For as long as I can remember, I have loved dancing. When I was a little girl, my father would waltz across the kitchen floor with me standing on top of his feet. I'd forgotten this was carpet. It's really hard to dance on it. When I grew old enough to start dating, it became important for me that boys knew how to dance. And that applied to the man who asked to marry me. Hans can dance. But soon after our honeymoon was over, we discovered that we ended dance evenings arguing with one another, staring blankly at the dance floor as others continued to have fun. Hans was frustrated with my inability to follow his footstep, and so was I. And this has nothing to do with me having to do everything backwards, and it does. It would take years before it dawned on us that maybe if we took dance lessons, we could rediscover the pleasure of dancing together. And so it was at the Arthur Murray Studio in Ottawa that dance lessons made it from New Year's resolution list to reality. The first evening, we learned the steps, the basic steps of 4 dances. I was in heaven. We learned the waltz, a basic square in the 3-beat tempo that goes like this. And so easy. And we learned the rumba, also a basic square, very different, very sensuous. That goes like this. Slow. Really, really slow. And we learned the merengue. Now this one is kind of fun. You've ever been to the cinema where the cinema is filled and there's only 2 seats available over there? All the other seats are full, and you have to go, excuse me? And finally, foxtrot, one of my favorite dances, more linear, and it goes something like this. Fly me to the moon, slow, slow. I loved it all. Soon we would learn many different steps and many more dances. The studio hosted every Thursday night a dance party. It really was a group practice, and that's certainly the point of view from which I attended. There was one basic rule. Everybody showed up between 7 and 9, and the only basic rule was that every time the music changed, we had to change partners. It took a while before Hans and I started attending because we felt that we had to know at least a basic number of steps before we could go. And when we started, I was in heaven. It was wonderful because as a woman, I was being led. And when I found myself in the arms of a good dancer or a dance instructor, I would be led into doing steps I hadn't even learned yet, and it was wonderful. Hans, on the other hand, struggled because he had to lead his female partners with a small repertoire of steps, and he struggled through it. I knew that. His silence on the way back home after dance practice spoke volumes. Hands on the steering wheel, staring blankly at the road, grinding his teeth. Until one night, he was chatty. He said, "Oh, I had such a good time tonight. It was the best practice so far," and I was so happy for him. He said, "Oh, wow, I'm thrilled. What happened? He looks at me and smiles. He says, I danced with Joanne. Really? It shouldn't have been that way. Joanne was the best dancer in the whole studio. So I was doubly curious because I felt that he should have been intimidated, not ecstatic. So I said, well, what is it? What made it so special? He went on, Joanne was so centered. She is so perfectly balanced. Joanne is light as a feather. And you know what? Joanne followed every one of my mistakes, and she never stopped smiling. I said, keep your eyes on the road. All of a sudden, weeks worth of dance practices flashed before my eyes. With vivid images of the faces of the poor guys I'd felt obligated to correct, even backlead into submission, into doing the steps correctly. I had failed to realize that all along I'd been expecting my life partners and dance partners not to have two left feet while I was attending to dance practice with only my left brain. You know, the side of the brain that organizes knowledge from the past into the present so the future is a better place. Technical, analytical, mathematical, that's how I danced. I'd forgotten to involve my right brain, the side of the brain that feels the people in the space, the side of the brain that feels the space it fills, the side of the brain that would have allowed me to be perfectly centered, always balanced, light as a feather. The side of the brain that would have made me notice that I was failing at my number one duty as a dancer. As a female dancer, I had to follow. And the only way I could follow was with my right brain. Dancing is really simple. It is the art of two people moving together as one in perfect harmony. Thank you.